That industrial eyesore is ruining our community's curb appeal, and I'm having your power disconnected right now. You can't run heavy machinery in a residential neighborhood. This isn't some blue-collar trailer park. That's what Bradley Peterson screamed at me across my driveway at 8:47 on a Saturday morning, his fat face purple with rage as he gestured toward the utility truck he'd hired to illegally disconnect my electrical service. He stood there in his pink dress shirt stretched tight across his bloated gut, black dress pants straining at the seams, designer sunglasses perched on his sweaty forehead, clipboard pressed against his chest, absolutely convinced he could cut power to a workshop while the state utility commissioner stood watching. I'm Commissioner Jack Reynolds, and for 34 years I've regulated every electrical utility in this state, ensuring that power flows safely and legally to every home, business, and workshop that needs it. What Bradley didn't know when he ordered that illegal disconnection was that he'd just violated state utility statutes in front of the one person with absolute authority to investigate his development's electrical infrastructure, shut down his entire community's power supply, and ensure he spent the next decade in state prison for utility fraud. What Bradley also didn't know was that in exactly 14 months, he'd be standing in state court wearing orange jail scrubs while I testified about his systematic utility violations, illegal electrical work, and fraudulent power connections that endangered 350 families, leading to his conviction on multiple felonies and the complete shutdown of his corrupt development. But right then, with the morning sun glinting off my workshop's legally installed electrical service and the smell of Bradley's expensive cologne mixing with diesel exhaust from his hired utility truck, I stepped back and hit record on my phone. Because I already knew exactly how this would end. What would you do if some HOA tyrant tried to cut your power for building a legal workshop? Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments, because this story will show you exactly how one man's contempt for working people accidentally triggered the largest utility fraud investigation in state history. My name is Jack Reynolds, 62 years old, and I've spent my entire career ensuring that electrical power flows safely and legally to every citizen in this state. From rural ranches to urban high-rises to suburban workshops where people pursue honest craftsmanship. I started as a lineman climbing poles in ice storms, worked my way up through grid management, and for the last 8 years, I've served as the state utility commissioner. I'm the man who signs the orders that keep the lights on for 4 million people, writes the regulations that govern every watt of electricity, and shuts down illegal power connections that endanger communities. After my wife Sarah passed from cancer 3 years earlier, the big family home felt too empty, too full of memories of her laughter echoing through rooms where we'd raised 2 kids who were now grown with families of their own. My daughter Amy was an electrical engineer in Denver, following in my footsteps with a career that made me proud every single day. My son David ran his own construction company in Colorado Springs, building homes that actually met electrical code standards. I needed somewhere I could simplify my life while still dedicating myself to the demanding work of regulating utilities that keep this state running. More than that, I needed a workshop, a place where I could work with my hands, restore vintage industrial machinery, and find peace in the precision of electrical systems that function exactly as designed when installed correctly. I wear the same clothes most days when I'm not conducting official inspections or testifying before legislative committees. Red and black flannel shirt, gray t-shirt underneath, jeans, tan work boots. Nothing fancy. If you saw me at the electrical supply store buying wire and conduit, you'd think I was just another contractor working on weekend projects. What you wouldn't know is that I can spot code violations from 100 yards away, recognize fraudulent electrical installations with mathematical precision, and shut down entire developments with the stroke of a pen and my official signature. The house was a modest ranch on 2 acres in Oak Creek Estates, a newer development about 20 minutes outside Denver that had attracted retirees and working families with its promise of reasonable governance and respect for homeowner rights. Oak Creek had seemed perfect when I first toured it. The selling point was the existing 40x60 steel workshop in the back, plus enough space to install the serious electrical service I'd need for restoring vintage lathes and milling machines. The marketing materials spoke of light-touch governance, respect for tradesmen, and supporting residents' hobbies and home-based businesses. What I discovered was a criminal organization disguised as a homeowners association, led by a man who treated working-class values with contempt and electrical safety standards like suggestions that didn't apply to his profit margins. Bradley Peterson was 55 years old, president of Oak Creek Estates HOA and a middle manager for a logistics company who'd clearly plateaued in his career and was looking for a kingdom to rule. He lived in a showcase house that dominated the entrance to the development, drove a silver BMW that he parked diagonally to show it off, and walked with a strut that suggested importance while his eyes constantly darted around looking for someone to correct. The man had that particular brand of white-collar arrogance that comes from never having worked with his hands, never understanding the dignity of honest labor, and never comprehending that some people find fulfillment in creating things rather than just consuming them. His pink dress shirt was always perfectly pressed despite his considerable gut. His black dress pants creased sharp enough to cut paper, and his clipboard contained enough fabricated violations to paper every wall in his oversized house. Bradley patrolled Oak Creek Estates in his white golf cart with amber flashing lights and community aesthetic preservation painted on the sides, documenting infractions with the obsessive dedication of someone whose sense of self-worth depended on controlling every aspect of his neighbors' lives. The mechanical whir of his cart's electric motor had become the soundtrack of tyranny for 350 families who'd made the mistake of buying homes in his personal kingdom. Before I even closed on the property, I'd pulled every permit myself and designed the electrical service upgrade. I hired the best commercial electricians in the county, guys I'd worked with for decades, to install a dedicated 480-volt, three-phase service drop for the heavy industrial machinery I restored. We ran heavy-gauge overhead line from the pole at the street, down the side of the property, to a dedicated meter bank on the workshop. It was industrial-grade, perfectly safe, completely code-compliant, and visible from the street if you stood at a certain angle. For 2 years, life was peaceful. I worked my commission job during the day dealing with rate hikes, infrastructure grants, and grid stability, and retreated to the shop in evenings and weekends. The smell of cutting oil, the hum of a well-tuned motor, the satisfaction of bringing rusted American iron back to life, that was my therapy after losing Sarah. The HOA seemed harmless initially. Reasonable dues, roads plowed in winter, nobody bothered me. I kept my lawn mowed, followed the rules, and assumed that as long as I paid my bills and minded my business, I'd be left alone. Then came Bradley's election as president. The first time we met, I was washing my work truck, a heavy-duty Ford F-250 with a toolbox and utility workers keep the lights on bumper sticker. Bradley's golf cart whirred up to my driveway, and he stepped out adjusting his designer sunglasses like a crown. "Good morning, neighbor," he chirped with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Bradley Peterson, your new HOA president." His gaze drifted past my garage to the workshop, eyes narrowing behind designer frames. "That's quite an industrial structure you have back there, Jack, very mechanical." "Well, it's a workshop," I said, "came with the property." "Yes, well," Bradley said, making notes on his clipboard, "we're trying to elevate Oak Creek Estates. Move away from the rural mechanic vibe toward something more executive. More refined." I chuckled. "Well, I'm not an executive, Bradley. I'm a utility man." He didn't like that. He pointed his pen at the heavy black cable running from the pole to my workshop, the service drop I'd paid $6,000 to install properly. "That wire is very thick, very unsightly. It cuts right across the sightline. Have you considered burying it?" "Burying a high-voltage service drop over that distance would cost about $30,000, I said calmly. "Overhead is standard, code-compliant, and permitted. It stays." Bradley's fake smile vanished. "We have bylaws regarding aesthetic harmony, Jack. Unsightly utility conveyances are strictly regulated. I'm going to need you to look into remediation options." "It's a power line, Bradley," I said, turning back to my truck. "It looks like a power line." 2 weeks later, the harassment began. Notice of violation. Unauthorized utility structure, demanding I submit plans to bury the line within 30 days or face escalating fines. I ignored it. State utility regulations supersede HOA bylaws for service drops. I knew the law because I helped write it, but Bradley didn't care about statutes. He cared about power. The letters escalated: $200 daily fines, $500 daily fines, threats of liens, and foreclosure. He started patrolling my property line with his measuring tape, bringing bored cronies to point and gesture like I was running a meth lab instead of restoring machinery. The breaking point came that Saturday morning. I was finishing breakfast when I saw the beat-up van with Sparky's electric pull-up, followed by Bradley's golf cart. A nervous young electrician climbed out while Bradley screamed orders. "I don't care what the utility company said. I am the president of this association, and I'm authorizing you to remove that blight. Cut the line at the weatherhead." The kid looked terrified. "Sir, that's a live service drop. I can't just cut it. That's dangerous and illegal." "Do not quote laws to me," Bradley shrieked, his face turning purple. "Cut the line." I stepped off my porch, boots crunching on gravel. "Morning, Bradley. You might want to rethink what you're asking this young man to do." Bradley spun around, eyes wild. "You ignored my letters, you ignored the fines. I'm enforcing standards right now." He shoved the electrician toward the pole. Cut it. Or I'll make sure you never work in this county again. The kid, intimidated and young, reached for his bolt cutters. He looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry, sir, he says he has authority. He doesn't, I said quietly. But go ahead, if you cut that line, son, you're going to learn a very expensive lesson about the Public Utilities Code. Snap sparks showered down. The hum of my workshop fans died instantly. Bradley stood there panting, triumphant smirk plastering his sweaty face. There, he gasped, now you'll follow the rules. Instead of anger, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You just tampered with regulated public utility infrastructure, Bradley, I said quietly. You just committed a felony, and you did it to the state utility commissioner. Bradley laughed dismissively. Commissioner of what? The garbage dump. I pulled out my phone, not to call police, not yet. I called the Regional Power Authority Operations Center. This is Commissioner Reynolds, I said. Authentication code Alpha Zulu 94. I'm reporting critical infrastructure tampering at my residence. I'm authorizing emergency safety shutdown for the entire sector feeding Oak Creek Estates. We have a rogue element compromising grid stability. Shut it down, all of it. Bradley wanted to control the power? Fine. Let's see how he liked it when I turned his off. The silence that followed my phone call was profound and immediate. At exactly 8:54 a.m., the electrical hum that forms the background soundtrack of modern suburban life, air conditioners, pool pumps, garage door openers, security systems, died instantly across all 350 homes in Oak Creek Estates. Traffic lights at the development entrance went dark. The electronic gate froze mid-cycle. Even the decorative fountain at the community entrance fell silent as its pumps lost power, with the mathematical precision of a grid sector being deliberately shut down by someone with absolute authority. Bradley stood in my driveway, his triumphant smirk evaporating faster than morning dew as the scope of what I'd just done became clear. His fat face went from its usual pink flush to ashen gray as he processed that his own $2.8 million showcase house was now as dark as every other residence in his kingdom. What did you do? Bradley demanded, his voice rising in pitch as panic began replacing his suburban arrogance. Why are the streetlights out? Turn them back on immediately. Emergency grid protection protocol, I replied calmly, slipping my phone back into my red and black flannel shirt pocket. When unauthorized personnel tamper with high-voltage infrastructure, standard procedure is to de-energize the entire sector to prevent cascading failures and protect public safety. You ordered an illegal disconnection, Bradley. The grid is now protecting itself. The young electrician from Sparky's Electric, Jason, according to his name patch, dropped his bolt cutters like they were radioactive, his face pale with the realization that he'd been manipulated into committing a serious crime. Sir, I told him cutting live service drops was dangerous and illegal. He threatened to get my company blacklisted if I didn't do what he said. I know, son, I said, my voice softening slightly, you're not the criminal here. But you need to stay right where you are, because investigators are already on their way and your testimony is going to be crucial. Within 15 minutes, Oak Creek Estates looked like a federal crime scene. 2 State Utility Commission enforcement vehicles, 3 county sheriff's cruisers, and a Regional Power Authority emergency response truck rolled through the frozen security gates with flashing amber and blue lights, heading straight for my property where Bradley's illegal power disconnection had triggered the largest utility safety investigation in county history. State Utility Investigator Sarah Chen stepped out of her vehicle wearing her official commission vest and hard hat, took one look at the severed service drop dangling from the pole, and knew exactly what had happened. Sarah was a sharp-eyed engineer I'd hired 5 years ago, and she'd seen this pattern before. HOA tyrants who thought their suburban authority superseded state utility law. Commissioner Reynolds, she said formally, ignoring Bradley completely while documenting the scene with professional precision. We received your critical infrastructure tampering report. Status: willful destruction of regulated utility equipment, I reported, pointing to the cut line sparking slightly in the morning breeze. Ordered by Mr. Peterson, executed under duress by the contractor. The entire sector is de-energized for safety pending full infrastructure inspection. Bradley tried to bluster his way through the crisis with the same arrogance that had defined his HOA presidency. Now see here. I'm Bradley Peterson, HOA president. I authorized the removal of an aesthetic nuisance that violated community standards. This is a private community matter. Sarah turned to him with the expression of someone who'd prosecuted dozens of utility fraud cases. Sir, are you confessing to ordering the destruction of state-regulated infrastructure? Because that service drop belongs to the power company, not the homeowner. You just committed a Class 4 felony. It was ugly. Bradley screamed, as if aesthetics were a legal defense for destroying critical infrastructure. It violated our community's visual harmony standards. But the real investigation was just beginning. As Sarah's team documented Bradley's crimes, I walked her over to the main electrical distribution cabinet for the neighborhood, located just 50 yards from my property line. I'd noticed irregularities there for months, unusual load patterns, unexplained power draws, but hadn't had probable cause to inspect it officially. Now, thanks to Bradley's tampering, we had legal justification to examine everything. Sarah, I said quietly, while the power is off, let's verify the integrity of the main distribution system. I want to see what's behind that locked cabinet. When we opened the distribution panel, what we found made Sarah gasp audibly. It wasn't just standard utility equipment. It was a masterpiece of systematic fraud that had been hidden behind official-looking locks for years. Jumper cables bypassing the main meters for the community clubhouse, pool pumps, and decorative lighting. Unauthorized taps feeding what appeared to be private residences directly from the unmetered side of the electrical bus. And a maze of amateur wiring that violated every safety code in the state electrical manual. "He's stealing power," Sarah whispered, photographing the evidence with the methodical precision of someone building a criminal case. "He's bypassing meters for the common areas and charging residents for electricity they're not actually using." "Well, not just the common areas," I said, tracing a heavy-gauge wire that disappeared into underground conduit running toward the largest house in the neighborhood. "Let's see where that leads." Well, using ground-penetrating radar equipment from Sarah's investigation truck, we followed the conduit path across the utility easement. It led straight to Bradley's showcase mansion, the same house where he'd been lecturing residents about following rules while systematically stealing electricity to heat his pool, power his workshop, and charge the golf cart he used to patrol the neighborhood. Meanwhile, residents were emerging from their powerless homes with the confused anger of people whose Saturday morning routines had been shattered by their HOA president's criminal stupidity. Garage doors wouldn't open. Coffee makers died mid-brew. Air conditioning systems fell silent on what was shaping up to be an 87-degree day. Thomas Green, the Vietnam veteran from Maple Street, approached our growing crowd of investigators with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd survived real emergencies. "Jack, what's the story here? Whole neighborhood just went dark. Bradley ordered an illegal disconnection of my electrical service," I explained, watching Bradley's face as the truth spread through the community. "But during our safety inspection, we discovered systematic tampering with the main electrical infrastructure. Dangerous, illegal tampering that's been stealing power and endangering every family in this development." Bradley, sensing his control slipping away like water through his fingers, tried to rally the neighbors against me. This man used his government connections to shut off our power because he refused to follow simple community standards. He's holding our entire neighborhood hostage over his industrial workshop. But Thomas Green wasn't buying it. "Wait a minute, Bradley, you cut his power line? I saw the sparks from my kitchen window. You cut a live electrical line." "I enforce the bylaws," Bradley shrieked, his voice cracking with desperation. "You're an idiot," Thomas said flatly. "You don't cut power lines, that's how fires start, that's how people die." More neighbors joined the growing crowd, their anger shifting from me to Bradley as they understood what had really happened. "My insulin needs refrigeration. My mother's oxygen concentrator is on battery backup. When is the power coming back on?" I stepped forward, letting my official authority fill the morning air. "Folks, I'm Jack Reynolds, State Utility Commissioner. Mr. Peterson ordered an illegal disconnection that triggered an emergency safety shutdown. But during our inspection, we've discovered evidence of massive utility fraud and theft of service that's been endangering your families for years." I pointed to the open distribution cabinet where Sarah's team was documenting the illegal connections. "Someone has been bypassing meters and stealing electricity while charging you for services you weren't receiving. Until we trace every illegal wire and verify the safety of the entire electrical system, I cannot authorize re-energization." The crowd turned toward Bradley with expressions that would have made a smarter man run for cover. "Stealing electricity?" someone demanded. "Is that why our utility bills kept going up while you claimed we were using more power?" Bradley was sweating profusely now, his pink dress shirt stained dark with panic and guilt. "That's administrative efficiency, cost-saving measures. I was investigating usage patterns to benefit the community." "By wiring your house to bypass the meter," Sarah asked loudly, holding up photographs of the illegal connections. "By stealing power while charging residents for electricity they weren't using." The collective gasp from 43 neighbors was audible across the morning air. But Bradley wasn't done destroying himself. His arrogance was a survival mechanism, and he doubled down with the desperation of someone whose criminal empire was collapsing in real time. I am the president of this association. I authorize all utility work. Any modifications were done for the community's benefit. Did the community benefit from you heating your private pool with stolen electricity? I asked, watching his face crumble as the scope of his crimes became public knowledge. Bradley's response was to scramble into his golf cart and speed toward his mansion, presumably to destroy evidence before investigators could secure it. But Sarah had anticipated exactly that move. Units 7 and 9, suspect fleeing toward residence, she radioed to the state troopers positioned throughout the development. Secure the premises and prevent evidence tampering. Two patrol cars peeled off with flashing lights, intercepting Bradley's golf cart before he could reach his front door. The investigation had just escalated from regulatory enforcement to criminal prosecution, and Bradley Peterson was about to discover that utility fraud carries consequences that can't be avoided through HOA authority and pink dress shirts. The power would stay off until every illegal wire was removed, every safety violation corrected, and every cent of stolen electricity accounted for. Oak Creek Estates was about to have a very dark, very quiet weekend, giving everyone plenty of time to think about the man they'd allowed to control their community while systematically robbing them blind. The war was escalating, and Bradley was about to learn that stealing electricity from a utility commissioner was the kind of mistake that destroys lives completely. Bradley's desperation reached systematic criminal levels the morning he tried to bribe state utility investigator Sarah Chen with $75,000 cash to overlook minor electrical irregularities, before residents discovered the full scope of his utility fraud operation. It was 7:17 a.m. on Sunday, the neighborhood still dark and powerless from my emergency shutdown, when Bradley approached Sarah's investigation vehicle carrying a leather briefcase that would become evidence in his federal corruption trial. I watched from my kitchen window in my red and black flannel shirt, coffee mug warm against my palms, as Sarah activated her body camera and engaged Bradley with the professional calm of someone who'd spent years prosecuting utility fraud. His pink dress shirt was wrinkled and stained from 36 hours of panic, black dress pants disheveled, designer sunglasses unable to hide the terror in his bloodshot eyes as he leaned into her window. "Look, Ms. Chen," Bradley said, his fat fingers trembling as he opened the briefcase to reveal stacks of cash bundled with bank straps. "We're both professionals here. Sometimes paperwork gets misplaced. Sometimes investigations find inconclusive evidence. This is just appreciation for your flexibility regarding minor technical issues that don't really affect safety." The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. Bradley was offering a bribe to overlook safety violations that could kill 350 families, while talking to the one investigator in the state who dedicated her career to prosecuting exactly that kind of criminal negligence. "Mr. Peterson," Sarah said clearly for the recording, "you're offering me $75,000 to falsify a state investigation into critical infrastructure tampering. That's bribery of a public official, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Within minutes, state troopers had secured the cash as evidence and added 3 new felonies to Bradley's growing indictment. But his arrest was delayed by a discovery that transformed our investigation from financial fraud into a public safety emergency that made my 34 years of utility experience feel inadequate for the scope of his criminal negligence. Our forensic electrical team, tracing the illegal connections from Bradley's mansion through underground conduit, discovered something that made my blood run cold. Bradley hadn't just bypassed meters. He'd tapped into high-voltage distribution lines using substandard residential wire, burying it 6 inches below the surface of the community playground where children played every day. Commissioner Reynolds, senior engineer Marcus Torres reported, his face pale with professional horror as he showed me ground-penetrating radar images. "We found 480-volt unshielded cable running directly under the swing set and sandbox. If a child had dug deep enough, if it had rained heavily and created conductivity, we could have had multiple electrocutions." The sheer recklessness of Bradley's greed was breathtaking. To save money on his private workshop heating and pool pumps, he'd turned the community playground into an electrified death trap where families brought their children every weekend. Governor Martinez's chief of staff called me within hours. "Jack, we got a complaint from your HOA president. Says you're digging up playgrounds because you're mad about a power line dispute." "Jim," I replied calmly, "I'm digging up playgrounds because we found 480-volt unshielded cable running 6 inches under children's swing sets. I'm sending you the photos right now." 30 seconds later, Jim's voice changed completely. "Jesus, Jack, Is that residential Romex wire carrying industrial voltage under a playground? Yes, installed by unlicensed amateurs to bypass meters while creating electrocution hazards for children. We're looking at reckless endangerment charges that could escalate to attempted negligent homicide. The federal investigation expanded when FBI agent Patricia Williams discovered Bradley's bribery attempt was funded through embezzled community reserve funds, money meant for emergency repairs that Bradley had treated as his personal slush fund. Wire transfer records showed systematic theft across multiple accounts, with Bradley using fake vendor contracts and inflated invoices to fund his lifestyle while cutting every possible safety corner. But the most damaging evidence came from within Bradley's own board. Treasurer Linda Martin, terrified by the criminal investigation, turned state's evidence in exchange for immunity. She provided emails, meeting minutes, and recordings where Bradley explicitly ordered the illegal wiring to maximize cost efficiency for community enhancement projects. Code words for funding his BMW payments and kitchen remodel. He told us the power company was ripping us off with excessive fees, Linda testified in her sworn deposition. He said he knew contractors who could optimize our electrical infrastructure. When I asked about permits and inspections, he said those were just government extortion designed to inflate costs. Bradley's final desperate gambit came at 3:17 a.m. Monday morning, when surveillance units caught him attempting to destroy evidence by setting fire to the HOA records office. Security footage showed him pouring gasoline on file cabinets containing years of fraudulent invoices, illegal wiring diagrams, and financial records that documented his systematic theft. My deputies intercepted him before he could strike the match, arresting him while he reeked of gasoline and expensive cologne. As they led him away in handcuffs, Bradley screamed at me across the parking lot, "You ruined everything. This was a perfect community until you showed up with your rules and your government interference." "No, Bradley," I replied quietly, watching the man who'd cut my power for aesthetics face the consequences of endangering 350 families. It was a perfect crime scene. I just turned on the lights. The investigation had revealed that Bradley's criminal enterprise extended far beyond electrical fraud into comprehensive infrastructure tampering. Gas line bypasses for his pool heater, illegal water main taps for his irrigation system, even sewage overflow diversions into nearby creeks to avoid treatment costs, environmental crimes that brought EPA investigators into our expanding federal case. Every system Bradley had touched was compromised by greed, negligence, and complete contempt for the safety of families who trusted him with their community governance. His attempt to cut my power had short-circuited his entire criminal empire, and tomorrow would bring federal charges that would ensure he'd never endanger another family. Bradley Peterson was about to discover that utility fraud carries consequences that can't be avoided through suburban authority, pink dress shirts, and criminal arrogance disguised as aesthetic enforcement. The federal takedown began at exactly 6:47 a.m. on a crystal-clear Tuesday morning when 23 FBI agents, State Utility Commission investigators, and EPA enforcement officers executed simultaneous search warrants across Oak Creek estates with the precision of a military operation designed to dismantle organized infrastructure crime. I stood on my front porch in my red and black flannel shirt, coffee mug steady in my hands, watching 4 black Suburbans roll through the neighborhood entrance in tight formation, followed by marked utility enforcement vehicles and specialized excavation units that gleamed like instruments of justice in the bright Colorado sunrise. Bradley's white HOA golf cart sat abandoned near his mansion, its amber flashing lights dead from the power shutdown I'd ordered 5 days earlier. His pink dress shirt and black dress pants had been replaced by rumpled pajamas and the wild-eyed panic of a man whose criminal empire was being systematically dismantled by federal agents who didn't care about his suburban authority. FBI Special Agent Patricia Williams stepped out of the lead vehicle with federal arrest warrants, and the kind of authority that makes infrastructure criminals realize their HOA kingdoms can't protect them from federal consequences. "Bradley Peterson," she announced, her voice carrying across the still dark neighborhood with mathematical precision. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit utility fraud, systematic bribery, reckless endangerment, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and organized racketeering affecting interstate commerce." Bradley's reaction was everything I'd hoped for during 34 years of utility regulation. Standing in his driveway in his pajamas like some deposed suburban dictator, he screamed about property values and government tyranny while federal agents documented his meltdown for court evidence. "This is harassment. I was implementing cost-saving innovations," he shrieked, his voice cracking as federal handcuffs replaced his clipboard with the finality of federal justice. That evening, the powerless community center became the stage for the most dramatic HOA meeting in Oak Creek Estates history. 350 residents packed into the darkened building with battery lanterns, flashlights, and 5 days' worth of accumulated fury at discovering their trusted leader had been systematically endangering their families. State utility investigator Sarah Chen stood at the front with evidence boards illuminated by emergency lighting, her professional demeanor barely containing the horror of what our investigation had revealed. "What you're about to see," she began, her voice cutting through the murmur of angry residents, "is not a series of mistakes. It is a deliberate, organized fraud and safety hazard created by your HOA president." The first evidence board showed thermal imaging scans taken over the past year, normal residential usage appearing in blue and green, while Bradley's mansion glowed white-hot with 26 to 31 kilowatts of consumption during mild evenings when most homes used 3 to 5 kilowatts. "Mr. Peterson accomplished this," Sarah explained, "by having unlicensed personnel tap into high-voltage distribution lines, bypassing meters and routing stolen power directly to his home, pool system, and private workshop. All of that unmetered consumption was then spread across your bills as common area charges." The room erupted when residents realized the extra $150 per month they'd been paying for 2 years was funding Bradley's stolen electricity. But the anger turned to horror when Sarah revealed the next board, ground-penetrating radar scans of the playground showing live. Unshielded 480-volt lines buried 6 inches under swing sets and sandboxes. "If a child had dug a few inches deeper with a plastic shovel," Sarah continued, her voice heavy with the weight of near tragedy, "or if heavy rain had saturated the soil while those lines were energized, we could have had multiple electrocutions." The silence that followed was profound. Every parent in the room went rigid as they processed how close they'd come to losing their children to Bradley's greed. Meanwhile, our comprehensive electrical inspection was revealing the full scope of Bradley's criminal negligence. Senior engineer Marcus Torres reported findings that made my 34 years of utility experience feel inadequate for the scope of systematic endangerment we discovered. "Commissioner Reynolds," Marcus explained in my workshop-turned-command center, "we've identified 847 separate code violations. Undersized service drops carrying dangerous loads, aluminum wiring bans since 1972, junction boxes buried without access panels, ground fault protection bypassed on outdoor circuits near pools and water features." The photographs were damning. Electrical panels with melted bus bars from chronic overloading, service drops sagging dangerously low over driveways, ground wires connected to gas lines that could have electrified entire houses during lightning strikes. "Conservative estimate," Marcus continued, "at least a dozen houses would have experienced electrical fires within 18 months. The Martinez family's panel was running at 180% capacity with no overcurrent protection. One more space heater and their house would have burned down with them inside it." The human cost was staggering and deeply personal. Thomas Green's granddaughter, undergoing chemotherapy for leukemia, had lost $4,000 worth of refrigerated medications during the power outage. Mrs. Patterson's oxygen-dependent husband had been hospitalized when his concentrator died and backup systems failed. "He could have died," she whispered through tears. "All because Bradley wanted to steal electricity for his golf cart charging station." The financial investigation revealed Bradley's operation extended far beyond simple meter bypassing. FBI forensic accountants traced $1.8 million in embezzled funds through shell companies and systematic overbilling hidden in complex utility invoices designed to confuse residents. "Commissioner," Agent Williams explained, "Bradley created phantom electrical consumption data to justify rate increases while stealing the actual power himself. Every time residents question rising costs, he'd generate fake usage reports showing excessive consumption, then fine them for energy waste that didn't exist." Bradley's final desperate gambit came at 3:17 a.m., when surveillance units caught him attempting to destroy evidence by setting fire to HOA records. Security footage showed him pouring gasoline on file cabinets containing years of fraudulent invoices and illegal wiring diagrams that documented his systematic theft. As deputies arrested him while he reeked of gasoline and failure, Bradley screamed his final threats. "You'll be sorry. Without my leadership, this place will fall apart." But looking at the sea of faces in that darkened community center, working families, retirees, veterans, young parents who trusted him with their safety, I knew the exact opposite was true. "No, Bradley," I replied quietly. "For the first time since this development was built, it actually has a chance." The federal courthouse became the stage for Bradley's complete humiliation, as Magistrate Judge Harold Martinez denied bail, with judicial precision that made utility criminals understand their suburban authority meant nothing in federal court. Mr. Peterson, Judge Martinez announced, you systematically endangered 350 families through utility fraud that violated every safety standard designed to protect human life. You buried high-voltage lines beneath children's playgrounds and attempted to destroy evidence. Bail is denied pending trial. The U.S. Attorney's Office announced comprehensive charges: 47 counts of utility fraud, 34 counts of reckless endangerment, 22 counts of wire fraud, 18 counts of bribery, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and environmental crimes. Each charge carried potential decades in federal prison. Standing outside the federal courthouse that evening, watching Bradley's transport vehicle disappear toward federal detention, I felt the deep satisfaction of watching systematic justice protect families from infrastructure fraud that could have killed them. Bradley Peterson had spent 4 years endangering families while documenting his crimes in fake efficiency reports. Now he would discover that federal prison doesn't come with golf carts, pink dress shirts, or the authority to endanger families through utility fraud disguised as aesthetic enforcement. The war was nearly over, and Bradley had lost by choosing the wrong utility commissioner to intimidate while turning children's playgrounds into electrified death traps. 18 months later, I stood in the witness box of Federal District Court in Denver, my hand on the Bible, wearing my official state utility commissioner dress uniform, dark blue with gold trim, 34 years of service ribbons across my chest, and the badge that Bradley Peterson had once dismissed as meaningless government bureaucracy. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and the mathematical certainty of justice being served, while morning sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating what would become Bradley's final performance as a free man. Bradley sat at the defendant's table in an orange federal jumpsuit that hung awkwardly on his diminished frame. His pink dress shirt and black dress pants replaced by prison-issued clothing that marked him as what he'd always been: a criminal who'd endangered families for profit. His clipboard was gone, replaced by handcuffs that clinked softly every time he shifted in his chair. The man who'd cut my power for aesthetics was about to be measured by federal sentencing guidelines that included public endangerment enhancements. State your name and occupation for the record. Assistant U.S. Attorney Sarah Kim began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent years prosecuting infrastructure fraud. Jack Reynolds, State Utility Commissioner for Colorado, 34 years of service, I replied, my words echoing through the packed courtroom where 197 families from Oak Creek Estates had gathered to watch justice flow through the federal system with hydraulic precision. Kim walked me through the evidence methodically. Bradley's systematic utility fraud: $1, $8 million stolen through meter bypassing and fake consumption charges. His reckless endangerment: 480-volt unshielded lines buried 6 inches under children's playgrounds. His obstruction of justice, attempting to destroy evidence through arson. And finally, the video of him ordering my power cut while screaming that my workshop was a blue-collar eyesore that didn't belong in his community. Commissioner Reynolds, can you explain to the jury how Mr. Peterson's actions affected these families? I looked directly at Bradley, watching him squirm in his orange jumpsuit as I detailed his crimes. Bradley Peterson didn't just steal electricity, he stole safety. He took families who trusted him with their community governance and turned their homes into death traps. He buried live electrical lines under playgrounds where children dug in sandboxes. He overloaded electrical panels until they melted. He bypassed ground fault protection on outdoor circuits near pools and water features. Every shortcut he took to fund his luxury lifestyle was a gamble with other people's lives. The victim impact testimony was devastating and deeply personal. Thomas Green, the Vietnam veteran whose granddaughter had lost life-saving medications during the power outage, took the stand with quiet dignity that filled the courtroom with profound weight. My granddaughter is 7 years old, Thomas said, his weathered hands steady as he held up hospital bills totaling $47,000. She's fighting leukemia. Her medications require constant refrigeration. When Bradley's fraud forced Commissioner Reynolds to shut down the grid for safety, those medications spoiled. We nearly lost her because this man wanted to heat his pool with stolen electricity. Mrs. Patterson spoke through tears about her oxygen-dependent husband who'd been hospitalized when his concentrator died. 43 years of marriage. He survived Vietnam, cancer, and a heart attack. He almost died because Bradley Peterson couldn't be bothered to pay his electric bill like everyone else. Jim Rodriguez, the contractor who'd questioned rising utility costs only to face fabricated consumption penalties, held up his binder of fake usage reports. He told me I was using 400% more electricity than my neighbors, called me wasteful and irresponsible, threatened to disconnect my service if I didn't pay inflated bills. All lies designed to cover his theft. Bradley's defense attorney, Pierce Morrison from Denver's most expensive law firm, tried desperately to salvage his client's case during closing arguments. Ladies and gentlemen, infrastructure management is complicated. Mr. Peterson was implementing cost-saving measures that benefited the community. Minor safety oversights don't justify destroying a man's life. The jury's verdict was swift and merciless. Guilty on all 47 counts of utility fraud, guilty on 34 counts of reckless endangerment, guilty on 22 counts of wire fraud, guilty on 18 counts of bribery, guilty on obstruction of justice, guilty on witness intimidation, guilty on environmental crimes. Bradley's face went from its usual pink flush to ashen gray as each guilty verdict landed like circuit breakers tripping under catastrophic overload. Judge Patricia Williams delivered the sentence with judicial precision that made infrastructure criminals realize their suburban kingdoms couldn't protect them from federal consequences. Mr. Peterson, you systematically endangered 350 families through utility fraud that violated every safety standard designed to protect human life. You buried high-voltage lines beneath children's playgrounds, overloaded electrical systems until they became fire hazards, and attempted to destroy evidence when your crimes were discovered. This court sentences you to 42 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. Bradley's reaction was everything I'd hoped for during 34 years of utility regulation. Standing in his orange jumpsuit, he screamed about cost efficiency and government overreach, while federal marshals prepared to escort him to a cell where pink dress shirts and contempt for working people were replaced by the mathematical certainty of concrete walls and steel bars. Your Honor, I was protecting property values, Bradley shrieked, his voice echoing through the courtroom as reality crashed down around him. These people don't understand infrastructure optimization. My methods saved the community thousands. The courtroom erupted in bitter laughter at Bradley's pathetic attempt to justify systematic endangerment as cost savings. Judge Williams gavelled for order while Bradley's expensive defense attorney tried desperately to control his client's self-destructive meltdown. The financial reckoning was swift and absolute. Bradley's entire criminal empire was liquidated through federal asset forfeiture. His $2.8 million showcase mansion, silver BMW golf cart with amber lights, offshore accounts, everything was seized and sold. The total recovery exceeded $3.4 million, ensuring every victimized family received full restitution plus damages for endangerment and emotional distress. But the real victory was community transformation. Oak Creek Estates was completely rewired to actual code standards by licensed electricians who understood that safety isn't optional. The new electrical infrastructure became a model of proper utility management, with transparent billing, regular safety inspections, and community oversight that prevented future fraud. The governance transformation was remarkable. The HOA was dissolved by court order, replaced by the Oak Creek Community Association, a simple, transparent body with one rule about utilities. All electrical work must comply with state code and be inspected by licensed professionals. Period. Thomas Green became the new president, running on a platform of safety over aesthetics. The state legislature called me to testify about Bradley's crimes and the regulatory gaps he'd exploited. The result was the Utility Consumer Protection and HOA Transparency Act, comprehensive legislation that made Bradley's crimes impossible to repeat. HOAs could no longer interfere with service drops or meters. Any efficiency project touching electrical infrastructure required utility and state approval. Tampering with communal utility systems became an explicit felony with mandatory prison time. Property values increased 37% after the elimination of Bradley's dangerous wiring and fraudulent billing, proving that honest infrastructure management attracts quality residents while utility fraud destroys communities. The playground where Bradley had buried death traps was rebuilt with proper safety standards and a memorial plaque, in memory of what almost happened, in honor of the commissioner who stopped it. The federal precedent spread across America like properly grounded electrical current. United States v. Peterson became the template for prosecuting utility fraud nationwide, with federal prosecutors citing our investigation in 89 subsequent cases involving HOA infrastructure crimes. My role evolved into national leadership of the Federal Utility Safety Task Force, employing 32 investigators, 18 electrical engineers, and 12 prosecutors who specialized in dismantling infrastructure fraud operations before they could endanger communities. We'd investigated over 600 cases, condemned 2,400 unsafe electrical systems, and sent 73 criminal HOA officials to federal prison. The scholarship fund, established with Bradley's seized assets, had sent 52 students to engineering school with full funding for degrees in electrical engineering, utility management, and public safety. Each graduation ceremony reminded me that Bradley's criminal greed had accidentally funded the next generation of professionals who would protect families from infrastructure terrorism. 2 years later, standing in my fully restored workshop in my red and black flannel shirt, watching the sunset over Oak Creek Estate's properly lit streets powered by safe, legal electrical infrastructure, I reflected on Bradley's accidental gift to America. His attempt to cut my power for aesthetics had triggered the most comprehensive utility fraud investigation in state history, leading to federal legislation protecting millions of families from dangerous electrical systems. Bradley himself was serving his sentence at Federal Correctional Institution Florence, where his pink dress shirts had been replaced by orange jumpsuits, and his authority to endanger families was replaced by the knowledge that federal prison doesn't come with golf carts or the power to steal electricity while burying death traps under children's playgrounds. Share your utility fraud nightmare in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories where utility commissioners meet suburban tyrants and justice flows through the electrical grid with unstoppable precision. Bradley learned that lesson